Good evening and welcome to a special edition of An Hour with Bob. Here we are. We are still at the Epic Assisted Living Center here in Providence, Rhode Island on Blackstone Boulevard, and we'll get into that why we're still here as a result of an injury that I had a while back. And I'd like to thank all the folks that have sent cards, letters, email messages, Facebook messages, and those that have come and spent some time with me in this odyssey of sort. This is not my idea of a Bob's Big Adventure, I might add. But I've been stuck here over 60 days. Now, I should say stuck here because they've been very good to me, and it's a great place. But if you go to be in a place for 60-something days, this isn't a bad place to be. Anyway, and I also especially want to thank my good friend, John Flanagan. Not only is he my director for 2 decades, but he's been a good friend, and without him, we couldn't do the show An Hour with Bob. We really couldn't. I mean, I couldn't possibly function without John. You know, we're shorthanded today. We're doing a show. He's running 3 cameras today here. Usually we have people on each camera, but it's in the middle of the afternoon. It's a beautiful day out. It's in August, and you know, it's tough to get people, especially when you're not paying them. Anyway, folks, you college kids and even high school kids, if you want to be part of An Hour with Bob, you want to work on the set, you want to learn how to run a camera, you want to learn how to be a director, be an on-air personality maybe even, or be a sound person or a CG operator, get a hold of me, bob@bobsadventures.com, ventbob@gmail.com, or Bob Venturini on Facebook. If you want to be a part of the show, we tape our shows normally on Monday evening, every other Monday evening at the Cox, or used to be called the Cox facility, the studio in Pawtucket off of Newport Avenue, across from the old Building 19, as they say in Rhode Island. It doesn't exist anymore, by the way. But anyway, across there, 670 Narragansett Park Drive, we tape the shows. You're out of there by 9:30. We're done. Our crew usually gets there about 6:30. By 9:30, you're all done. We sometimes, most of the time, we go out and get something to eat after the show. We have a lot of fun. So if you want to be part of An Hour with Bob and learn video production, get a hold of me. In fact, you can call me at 401-529-9950. Great for college students. You won't get credit for it, but maybe you could if you talk to your professor and if you're taking that kind of course, a communications course or whatever. Anyway, let's get to my guest tonight, huh? This is a guy, and I can say this because I've been doing the show for 23 years, and I invited other people, but the guy that showed up is a guy I happen to like. And he's been on the show before, hasn't he? Huh?
Yes,
Ken Block has been on the show before. Oh, it's Ken Block, I just give it to you. He's running for governor of the state of Rhode Island, and he's here with us today to talk. We'll talk a little bit of politics, we'll talk family, we'll talk personal. We'll just talk on An Hour with Bob. Ken Block, nice to have you here.
Nice to be here.
How you doing?
Next time we're outside this building, okay? We're gonna get you out of here.
We're going to get me out of here?
We're gonna break you out.
Well, I did find out, they told me that I'm going to get the breakout pretty soon. They told me they can't keep me here much longer because I'm running out of time, actually. So how you doing? How's the campaign going?
The campaign's coming along really great.
Okay.
It's a grind. It's very difficult. Every day is just up and out the door early. We get home late, and there's 1,000 different things you do as a statewide candidate. But I love tackling the problems that are facing this state.
Right.
I'm driven to fix what's broken here, and I think that we're in a crisis in Rhode Island.
And you happen to be, I think, the only candidate that's not a politician per se.
That's right.
A businessman.
I have.
Not a career politician.
I'm not a career politician. I own 2 businesses. I run 2 businesses. I have 2 school-age kids.
Yeah.
And a wife who's a saint. And
She must be.
She really is. In every way. And what I know, right, the reason I'm in politics, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, is because I know that if we don't turn Rhode Island around economically, that my kids may be faced with leaving the state like so many others have left.
Right.
And that's avoidable, right? I mean, we don't need to be like that here. It's a lack of leadership, it's a lack of ideas, a lack of vision that locks us into the challenge that we have. And I want to break us out of that mode. I want to set us on a course to economic independence. I want to make us competitive with Massachusetts.
Right.
And when we do that, the jobs are going to come.
And people, whether they realize it or not, as you started to speak, you talked about your children and my children and other children that have to leave the state because they can't find a good job, a good salary. And who are they replaced by? They're replaced by illegal immigrants. They're replaced by immigrants. They're replaced by people that have little or no skill.
Right.
So you're taking away a skillful person, intelligent person that may be skilled in something that's valuable and needed in the state, but they leave the state because they can't find a job in the state.
Right. And the problem is that we are surrounded by successful states.
Which is odd.
And
Success usually breeds success.
But that means it's easily fixed what we have here.
Right.
So
right.
If what do we used to call Massachusetts? Massachusetts. Massachusetts had their economic crisis back in the late 90s. Governor Weld came into office, and he inherited a fiscal mess.
That was from Dukakis, right?
And from Dukakis. He grabbed a hold of that crisis. He made the changes necessary. He began the process of changing Massachusetts from Taxachusetts to what it is today.
Right.
Began the process of changing their school system to be a successful school system. And today, Massachusetts is a preferred place to do business, whereas Rhode Island is not. We can make the same changes, and I got to tell you, one of the things that I hear most consistently on the campaign trail are people saying, Rhode Island's so broken, I don't know if you can fix it.
Right.
But what I'm telling everybody out there is that this can be fixed. The model of how to do it just sits to our north. And the folks in Massachusetts don't drink different water than we do. They don't breathe different air than we do. And the genetics is pretty close.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So at the end of the day, I know that we can fix it.
Right.
We just need the leadership to show us the way.
But there is one significant difference between Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Having grown up all my life in Rhode Island and haven't been involved in politics all my life in Rhode Island. As a matter of fact, I ran for lieutenant governor 4 years ago, as you know, and I was tempted to run for lieutenant governor this year, but this messed me up. This whole thing. I've been laid up since the 13th of May, Oof. And I was actually laid up at home before that. This got infected. My artificial knee got infected, and they had to take it out. We'll get into that in a few minutes. Anyway. As a result, I had somebody file for me, but he wasn't even a politician. He didn't know what the heck he was doing. I told him to go file for me for lieutenant governor. I was going to run as an independent, and this was the year to run as an independent for lieutenant governor, I think, because you had 2 Democratic candidates, at least 2, and 2 Republican candidates, and they'd clash in the primary, and they'd be 1-on-1 against me in the general election. And I got almost 21,000 votes, and I spent less than $5,000 last time I ran. And I thought, especially explaining to people, finally just tell them right out. Last year I dabbled with it a little bit, talked about it a little bit, but I intended, Ken, in coming right out to the people. It's hard to do, especially in your position, because if you take a shot and you do it and it fails, you're losing a lot of money. But I was going to do it with on a wing and a prayer, but just come right and say, people, you idiots, you're dumb. You can't continue. You cannot keep putting the same people in and expect something different to happen. It doesn't work that way. It's a proven fact that if failure is imminent, and failure has been in your past, and failure has been in the present, and it will be in your future if you keep putting the same people in the same positions. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, calling the electorate stupid is something I'm going to stay away from.
I was going to, exactly.
So
you couldn't do that. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that. But I'm saying that because I'm not running, so I can say that. But and it's not like that. You can't call them uneducated because most people are educated. Yeah. But what gets me is they don't understand the dynamics of our state government versus Massachusetts. Yeah. Massachusetts happens to have the strongest governor in the country. And I don't mean because of Patrick, I mean Deval Patrick. Just the way it's set up, the government is set up, what the governor's powers are versus the legislative powers. Rhode Island, on the other hand, is the 49th weakest governor because of the way it's governed. In fact,
you know how to fix that, right? You know how we change that balance.
There's a lot of, go ahead.
The governor's light item veto is the big change.
Okay, that's number one.
That's the change that we need to make to balance power between the legislative and the executive branches. 44 other states give their governor the power of the light item veto.
Exactly.
44 other states.
So we're the smart ones? Are we the ones that are smarter than 44 other states? I think not.
No,
Right?
we're not.
We're not. And that's
We're
why
not.
we're going to continue to fail, because when you got a governor, and I've looked this up, I've checked this out. In the past, every governor has been elected with between 120 and 160,000 votes. That's what they've got. In the last 16 years, every Speaker of the House, no Speaker of the House has been elected with more than 5,000 votes. Do you know that?
Correct.
Has not got 5,000 votes yet. The Speaker of the House, whether it be Gordon Fox, whether it be Murphy, whether it be Howard, DeAngelis, go back to, I don't care how far you go back, even to Harry Corbin, they've had all the power and didn't have to spend nearly as much money, didn't have to run statewide, and they only have to answer to the people in their district. Like Gordon Fox only had to answer the people in Fox Point. Now, I mentioned this in my election when I ran 4 years ago, and did I get it stuck to me? I don't know if you know this, but we had a debate, the three candidates for lieutenant governor, and I did very well, I thought, at the debate. 3 nights later, they have Rapley from Channel 10, Bill Rapley, has the green screen behind him, and they're playing the video of the debate. They're showing the 3 candidates, right?
Yeah.
Me, Elizabeth Roberts, and Bob Healy. And as he's talking, he's saying, well, this is a dead heat. He opens up the news with, this is a dead heat for lieutenant governor. Elizabeth Roberts has 35%. Bob Healy has 23%. So I'm going, oh my God, I got to be right next to Roberts if if it's that close, right? He called it a dead heat, right? 35 and 23 is no dead heat, right?
Right.
So where's Bob Venturini, right? Still 42% out there. So I'm saying, oh my God, I'm going to have a heart attack. I must be right up there with Elizabeth Roberts. He goes, 42% undecided, and he shows a silhouette. It does not even mention me. So I called Channel 10. This is Channel 10. And by the way, what's his name? Rapley has his office, works right out of the State House.
Yep.
He's in the State House, so he's gotten way too comfortable with the Speaker. Well, don't you know, in our debate, I brought this whole thing up about the Speaker having all the power, and it shouldn't be that way, and it's ridiculous that what I'm saying now, again. And don't you know, I called Channel 10, and they said, oh my God, we didn't realize that. We'll fix that for the 11 o'clock news. The only change they made, Ken, in the 11 o'clock news was he said the same exact thing, 35 to 23, and he called it a dead heat, because if you take 5% off 35, that's 30, and you add 5 to 23, it's 28. That's a dead heat. That's what he called a dead heat, with 42% undecided. And no mention of Bob Venturini. In fact, the only change they made was they blacked out me in the background. When they still showed the same video, blacked me out. That was a Wednesday. The following Monday, I did a show, and a former reporter for one of the TV stations came in with the Providence Journal. He says, Bob, take a look at this. And I looked at it. It meant nothing to me. EDC hires somebody for $95,000 a year plus a nice benefit package. The EDC's been a joke anyway, right?
Yep.
They hired somebody for $95,000 a year, and with a benefit package, some woman. And I said, yeah, so? He said, that is Bill Rapley's wife.
Oh,
Now, is that a coincidence or is that a coincidence?
that's interesting.
So the next day, I ran into the governor, and I approached the governor the Tuesday. The day after this, I found this out, and I said to the governor, did you appoint Bill Rapley's wife to the EDC? He goes, no, that came directly from Fox's office. Now, is that curious? Is that strange? Is that unusual?
Wait. The Speaker of the House is hiring employees of the EDC.
The Speaker of the House appointed Judy Chan is her name, Chung or something like that. She got the job at the EDC at is it 90 or 95? I think it was $95,000 a year. And her job before that, she worked for Shaw's Market. She worked as a PR person for Shaw's Market.
So look, the separation of powers is an incredibly important thing.
Right.
The General Assembly, legislative leadership, has no business and no constitutional right to be playing in the sandbox of the executive branch. It's
Right.
the governor's responsibility and duty to make the employment decisions and hiring practices.
That's why I went directly to the governor and asked the governor point blank, did you
right.
hire her? He goes, I had nothing to do with that, Bob. He said, that came right out of Fox's office.
And look, this is why the governor's let-in and veto is so important. The governor's office has to have equivalent power to the legislative.
Right.
And the problem is, the only way you can get the let-in and veto is either by having the General Assembly pass a law, which we
they're not
know
gonna
that,
do.
which we know
They'll
they won't
never
do.
do that.
We know they won't do that. The
You
other
said
way you
your
get it,
constitutional amendment.
constitutional convention.
Convention, I mean, yeah.
So on the ballot this November, for all of your listeners,
Right.
aside from voting for Ken Block for governor, I ask you, in fact, I beg you, to vote yes on the question that asks, should we have a constitutional convention?
We absolutely
We
should.
need a constitutional convention so that we can put in place
Right.
the governor's let-in and veto. When you're only one of 6 states that doesn't have it,
Sinful.
I can assure you
Sinful. It's
that
absolutely
we're doing
sinful.
something wrong. We're doing
Absolutely
something
sinful.
wrong.
And I'll bet you, without even knowing, I'll bet you the states, I'll bet you I can name a couple of the states right off the bat that don't have it. It'll be a state like Vermont, who's number 50. It'll be a state like Texas, who has one of the worst, one of the lowest or weakest governors. It'll be a state like
In fact,
Louisiana.
in Texas,
Huh?
I've heard the lieutenant governor in Texas has more power than the governor.
Yes, yes.
Amazing.
Oh, I knew that. I knew that. They're the bottom 5. The bottom 5, as far as weakness, are Vermont, Rhode Island, Texas, I think Mississippi. I can't think of the other one. Louisiana, I think.
But you know what's interesting is a lot of people will say to me, why are you running for governor when the job is relatively weak? How can you make a difference working with the General Assembly that you can't control?
But you can be a voice against them, and if you talk enough about it, and you got that box, that what do they call
bully
it?
pulpit.
The bully pulpit.
The bully pulpit.
To talk about it, because that's what I wanted to do.
That's right.
'Cause I wanted to be. That's why I wanted to run for lieutenant governor, because nobody can buy me, and there's nothing that could make me change. I'm the most principled person on the face of the earth.
And look, we need people running for office for the right reasons as
Right.
opposed to the wrong reasons.
Right.
And the right reasons are because you want to make change. The right reasons are because you want to fix things that you perceive as broken. The wrong reasons are that
wanna promote your law
that would look like nice on my resume,
And you
or
want to
it's a
affect your
business
law
transaction,
practice,
right?
Or you
I
want to
mean,
be a judge.
That's right.
Right. Those are the wrong
those
reasons.
are all the wrong reasons. Now here's the thing. The governor's office actually has tremendous power. We just haven't had governors that have used that power.
had the guts. Yes, exactly.
You command the media's attention as the governor.
Right.
You need to use that power. You need to hold press conferences. You need to have things to say. You need to have agendas to do. And all too often we have governors who really don't have the vision. They don't have the agenda. They don't have the plan for what's necessary to turn Rhode Island around and to fix it. And I've already told your audience that the most important thing that we have to do is make Rhode Island economically competitive with Massachusetts. Now let's talk about how you do that. The way that you become economically competitive is to identify the areas where they're essentially kicking your butt, okay?
Right.
And you have to address those areas. So the cost of doing business in Rhode Island is higher for business than it is in Massachusetts.
Yes. You got to be equal.
You have to be equal. And places where we are unequal are in areas like the cost of unemployment insurance,
Right.
the cost of temporary disability insurance,
Sales tax.
sales tax, which is a much harder problem to solve than the other ones. And you can go on. They're easily identified. Okay? So half the challenge is identifying where you have to make the change.
Sure.
The second piece, the really hard piece, is paying for the cuts. Okay? Because in Rhode Island, in this budget year that we're in right now, we are $150 million short. We have a deficit. Every year for the next 4 to 5 years, and looking into the future, we have deficits.
Yeah.
The deficit grows to $400 million 4 years from now.
And it's mostly it's just paying the juice. Right?
There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of interest.
A lot of interest.
But to fix it, you have to find the savings so you can pay for the tax cuts. Because every time you cut a tax, less money comes in. If
Right.
you don't replace it with something, with savings, your budget deficit gets worse. And
Sure.
in Rhode Island, thankfully, we're not allowed to print money. Right?
Oh, isn't that good? Thank
It's a good
God.
thing,
Thank
right?
God for that. It'd be
We can't-
Confederate money by now.
We can't print money in Rhode Island, so we have to find the savings to pay for the tax cuts. So let's find the savings, okay? This is the whole ball game now. The
Okay,
whole
where
ballgame
would where
is
would
to
where
find
would
the
Ken Block
savings.
find the savings?
Now, it just so happens, to answer this question, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my business.
Go ahead.
I have a software engineering business, and in that business, we provide the food stamp benefits through our software to the state of Texas and to the government of Puerto Rico. So we put roughly $8 billion a year into the hands of about 6 million people.
What, $8 billion?
8 billion, yep. We are leading experts in the identification and elimination of waste and fraud.
We're going to get into that. Yeah,
We're going to
good.
get, and this is a good place to get into it.
Thank you.
And as an extension of that, we also have become pretty good at looking at waste and fraud in Medicaid. Okay? In Texas, we discovered and helped to eliminate $1 billion of waste and fraud just in their food stamp program.
Wow.
Just in their food stamp program.
Wow.
Okay? In 2010, I was having a conversation with Governor Chafee where he said that there's no such thing as waste and fraud in government spending programs.
I don't know where he is.
Okay.
I don't know where he is. I've had a couple of conversations with the man. He's a nice guy, but
And
he don't get it, I don't think.
he doesn't get it, and in fact, I know he was dead wrong about the waste and fraud in government spending programs because I deal with it professionally every day. So I offered to do a waste and fraud analysis for the state of Rhode Island for free.
For free.
For free. It took me the better part of a year to negotiate the free contract for the state of Rhode Island. Okay.
How do you negotiate
Only in Rhode
free?
Island.
Wait a
Only in
minute,
Rhode
how do you
Island.
negotiate? How do you have to negotiate
Don't
free?
even get into it. Okay? It took a long time to get it worked out, but we finally got it worked out.
Right.
And we were given the state's most of the state's food stamp data and most of the state's Medicaid data, and we began to look for different known areas of waste or fraud.
And
okay?
double dippers and
And,
stuff like that.
Let's even get more basic than that.
Really?
Yeah. One of the first things you look at when you have a program like this is you look for deceased individuals,
Right.
people no longer on this earth.
Right. And somebody's collecting
They
money
they
for
were
them.
receiving and spending their food stamp benefits from the grave
That's pretty hard to do.
for a long time.
Well, we've also led the nation in dead people voting. We have for decades.
But the purpose of government is to spend taxpayer dollars as carefully as you spend your own money.
Right.
Okay? And when government fails to do that, they're failing the very people they're supposed to serve. And when we are pumping money into dead people's pockets and they're spending it,
Wow,
and we
that's
don't
kinda
stop
tough to
it,
do.
that's outrageous. Okay? It's broken and it's wrong, and we identified that. We found prisoners at the ACI
Please.
spending their
tell
Medicaid
me.
benefits all over the country.
While they're in prison.
Yeah. Okay? The worst possible scenario. Okay? Because this is the easiest thing to identify. So
And
then,
the easiest thing to fix.
and the easiest thing to fix. The problem was there were two different state agencies involved. One that deals with when people die, and another one that deals with giving out benefits, and they weren't talking to each other in a
Right.
timely way.
Right.
So we fixed that. They got those two different agencies talking to each other. And I don't know if it was an email or a fax or a phone call, whatever it was.
It
but
wasn't hard to do?
It's not a hard one to do. With the ACI, it was the same problem, but the crazier situation with the prisoners and the benefits is that where the prisoners are come in and where the agency is located that gives out the benefits are on the same campus. They're really not that far away from each other. They could have threw open windows and they could have screamed.
Yelled it.
They
They
could have
could've
yelled the
yelled. Yeah,
information.
they
at each
could've
other,
yelled
okay?
the
Now look,
names.
and so this is what drives me crazy, right? When
Wow.
government fails to do some of the most basic things, that's when people get really agitated, and they have every right to be. I don't know when's the last time you went to the DMV?
We're going to get into that. I don't want.
You
to
want
get
me-
into
you
that
don't want
yet.
me to
No.
Okay.
I want to back up a little bit.
Okay.
You said, now you showed these people
We highlighted the fact that there were prisoners
dead people
and
dying,
dead people
dead people
actively
buying
spending,
stuff,
yeah,
spending
buying
money,
and spending money.
and you had prisoners,
Correct.
correct, not only in Rhode Island but from other states spending
No,
those
we only
cards?
we only looked at folks at the ACI.
No, I know that.
So,
but
they were
the money's being spent
yeah,
somewhere
all
else.
over the place.
All
That's
over
right,
the place.
all over the place.
And you're telling me you showed this to who?
We brought that to the attention of the state, and on those two issues, the state addressed them.
They did.
They did.
So they caught the people that were doing it.
They did.
Did they punish them at all?
Well, I don't know that they went looking for catching people. What they did was they put the processes in place to make sure it didn't happen anymore, and they turned the benefits off to the people that were getting benefits.
Well, it should be more than that. They were stealing.
I don't have any visibility what they did beyond that. But let me tell you some other things that we did. One of my personal beliefs is that when someone is taking advantage of one spending program, they take advantage of other spending
Oh,
programs.
they got it down. They got it down pat. They got them all down
So
pat.
we had an easy way of identifying individuals who traffic their food stamp card, who sell their food stamp benefits for cash.
Right.
And we weren't overly interested in that aspect of fraud, but what we were very interested in was for those who are trafficking their benefits, those who are selling their benefits for cash.
They obviously don't need the benefits.
What
if that's
did
the case.
how did they spend their Medicaid benefits? That's what we wanted to know. And what we found was the people who committed food stamp fraud
Also,
received OxyContin and Vicodin prescriptions at a rate close to 6 times the general Medicaid population.
wow.
Which tells you everything you need to know, right? And when you have that happening, right? When someone is receiving prescriptions where they can monetize it, where they can sell them and get cash.
Well,
we're paying for that.
They're selling their welfare cards. They're going to sell everything.
That's right.
Whatever they get their hands on, they're going to sell.
So the federal government estimates that 7% of Medicaid dollars goes to waste and fraud. 7%. In Rhode
how
Island,
much money? And what is the budget?
$2.1 billion.
$2.1 billion. And 7% of that, did you figure that
It's
out?
$140 million. $140 million.
Wow.
And we don't find very much
And that's $140 million in Rhode Island?
every year,
Just in Rhode Island?
just in Rhode Island.
$140 million. What would
That's-
that buy? What would that pay for?
That closes the budget deficit. $140 million. The state DOT.
All right, now we get into it. Go ahead.
They need $40 million a year. The DOT, the Department of Transportation, needs $40 million a year to fix all of our bridges that are falling down. $150 million pays for 4 years
Right?
of bridge work.
Right. And that's only 1 year's benefit.
That's right.
That's only 1 year's of fraud.
So there's all manner of things, but let's talk about let's focus on waste a little bit more, okay? 'Cause this is so crucially important.
Right?
Do you know anyone who's a state worker? You must know some folks who are state workers.
Of course.
Right? Okay. A great many of our state workers today still fill out a paper-based timesheet every week. Pen and paper on a piece of paper. Pen and ink.
that opens
pen,
up for
pen and ink
fraud.
on a piece
That-
of paper. Forget the fraud.
That,
Okay? There's 15,000 state workers. Now, if I were to stand up, the stack of paper, 15,000 sheets of paper, runs from the floor to the bottom of my chin. That's how much paper moves through our state government every week for
right.
paper timesheets. We estimate the cost of that to be as much as $20 million a year.
cut it out.
Yeah.
Come on, it couldn't be that much. Really?
You need an army of people to data enter the
Oh, that's
information
right.
that's on all those pieces
They
of
gotta
paper.
enter it.
Okay? Now, $20 million on paper-based timesheets and the processing of those timesheets versus $40 million a year is what we need to fix all of our falling down bridges.
So
we
you're
can pay for
halfway there.
they're halfway there just by being smart about handling timesheets.
Which is probably done by 48 of the other states.
Probably. There's probably very few large organizations left in the whole world
That still do a
that
paper.
still do paper-based timesheets.
Sure.
We have to modernize. We have to find that cost savings, and we have to spend it to make sure that things like our bridges don't fall down. By the way, I live on the East Bay, so every day I drive over a bridge going into Providence on Route 114 that goes over Route 6 in East Providence.
Sure.
That bridge is held up by the biggest set of Lego blocks you've ever
I
seen.
know, I've seen
I don't
it.
know if
I've
you've seen it.
Oh, I have. I have
Right?
seen
You
it.
see these
Somebody hit
stacks
it.
of wood.
Somebody
hit it. That's
recently,
right.
a couple of weeks ago.
Nearly,
4 weeks
they
ago.
nearly dislodged it.
Exactly.
Okay, it came halfway out. Now, I don't know how they
All
fixed
that-
that.
all
Do
that is-
do you think they had the
It's
world's
wood.
biggest
It's
the world's biggest sledgehammer to knock it back in? Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
these are gigantic blocks of wood. So what Mike Lewis at the DOT told me was they need $40 million additional dollars a year every year for 10 years to fix all those bridges.
Right.
And every day we drive. My guy Neil's over here in the background over here, and he and I drive all over the state every day. And every day we see new bridges that are held up by these blocks of
Sure.
water. I mean,
I can show you a few. I know it is a few.
And that's not the way that a successful state operates.
Especially a state as small as we have, we should be perfect
We
in every way.
and look, and it's easy to get overly negative about things, and I always have to catch myself, and I have to remind everyone listening to us that all of these problems are fixable, right? None of these problems requires rocket science to fix them.
Right.
And once we become economically competitive and we get our hands around the inefficiencies that we have here, our natural beauty and our small size and everything else that we have going for us will make us incredibly successful.
Well, I do a lot of traveling, and my adventure show I've probably done more for the state of Rhode Island to draw people into the state than EDC has in trying to get people in the state, and they've gotten paid, as I told you, one person made $95,000 a year. And that's why I wanted to run for lieutenant governor, because you probably know this, that the lieutenant governor's pay is $115,000 a year, something like that. Her chief of staff makes $165,000 a year, which absolutely it's more than the governor's pay. $165,000 a year, her chief of staff of the lieutenant governor.
Is that right?
And yes, and tell me what the lieutenant governor's job is. Anybody know? Does anybody know what the lieutenant governor does?
To wait for the governor to keel over.
That's right. At least if I was a lieutenant governor, I would use that, not only the pulpit, but the actual position. And instead of giving everybody, by the way, it's the highest paid department in state government. Do you know that? Per person. Per person.
I did not know that.
They make
either.
the highest pay. The breakdown of all the people that work for lieutenant governor's office, their pay, their salary is higher than any other department. Imagine the chief of staff of the lieutenant governor, a job that a lot of people wanted to abolish, a job that most people think shouldn't even happen. Not even lieutenant governor. Her assistant makes $165,000 a year. That's amazing to me. I would take that money and I would hire, at $160,000 a year, I could hire 5 people at $31,000 a piece out of college. So they wouldn't have to leave the state. Or I could hire 4 at $38,000 a year a piece, right? And keep 4 people in the state, and 4 gung-ho people, give them all in their talented fields of study and communications and video production and whatever, and put up the most amazing video production, and have other departments make departments out of the lieutenant governor's office with the intent on bringing people into the state, instead of just waiting for the governor to die.
Right. So, personally, I think what we ought to do with the lieutenant governor's office is simply just merge it into the governor's office.
Right. It should be.
It shouldn't be a separate staff. It shouldn't be somebody who is principally different than where the governor is in terms of their beliefs.
Right.
Because the whole idea, if something unfortunate were to happen to me as governor,
You want to continue.
I would like to know that my programs would continue the way
Sure,
they were,
exactly.
as opposed to being a totally different thing.
Right.
Because the lieutenant governor is on a totally different page than the governor is.
Right.
So I think that's a very common sense thing, and everything we're going to talk about, it hinges on common sense, right? I mean, that's the most important thing, and I got to hammer it a couple times when we talk today.
All right,
it's common sense. It's common sense.
Speaking of common sense,
Yep.
it has never worked. Nobody's ever fixed it. They all say they're going to fix it. They're all going to do it. I could fix it in a week, and I'm sure you could too. And that's the
Department of Motor Vehicles.
there you go.
The DMV.
It is such a joke. I used to go there all the time. I used to buy and sell cars. I used to be up there all the time. And first of all, what do they open at? 9 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock?
8:30.
8:30. But they close at like 3:15. Even though they don't close at 3:15. They're supposed to close at 3:30. But if you don't get in there before 3:15, they won't let you in the door, you know.
Correct.
And by the way, let's do the numbers here. 8:30 to 3:30 is how many hours? 7? An hour off for lunch, 2 20-minute breaks. You're down to 5 hours and 20 minutes working. That's my numbers.
I never looked at it that way.
Yeah.
So my measurement of success or lack of success is how long do you stand in line? Rhode Island is one
Too long.
Rhode Island is one of the few states left in the country where you have to pack a snack and a lunch to do your business at the DMV.
Right.
We did a press conference out in front of the DMV. And we did it at, I think it was 11 o'clock in the morning. And we were asking people as they were coming out, how long were you in there? The answer was 2.5 hours, 3 hours, okay? In Florida, you can do your DMV transactions at almost any corner store. Right?
Go no further than Massachusetts. You can do it at the mall.
I don't go to the DMV. I go to my AAA office, where I've never waited more than about 8 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. Right? Now that's the way it's supposed to work. The dealers, the automobile dealers, they have full-time employees whose job it is literally
to spend all day,
wait in line all day at the DMV. Do you know that they queue up at the DMV at 5 o'clock in the morning?
Right.
They get there to put their they get there to put their name on a piece of paper on the door to reserve their place in line. Then they go get breakfast, they go get coffee, then they have to be back over there to stand in line, and then they go upstairs. It could take them hours and hours. Sometimes they wait there all day, and they end up not being able to do the transactions that they brought with them, right? It is an utterly, fantastically broken organization. And we need to change it. And frankly, I think part of the solution at this particular point in time, since AAA manages to do it well,
let them do it.
Let them do more.
Right.
Let's find another AAA type organization and let them start doing the transactions.
And by the way, there was somebody years ago tried having a couple nights, at least one night a week, where you could go to the registry, because a lot of people can't go to the registry during the day. Let's do it at night. Let's do it at night. Let's do it on Saturday. But they don't do it. They got such a great union. I mean, again, you time it out. 8:30 to 3:30. It's how many hours, right?
It's hard to argue with the math.
And an hour off. They all get an hour off for lunch, and they all get 2 20-minute breaks.
Now, by the way, so the DMV has a computer system that was literally installed in the 1980s, right? That's when they put it in. That computer system is older than cell phones and fax machines.
So we can't talk to them.
It predates them, right? It was in existence before we all used cell phones. It was in existence before we all used fax machines. That's how old it is. And we've had a project now going on for almost a decade to try and replace it.
Upgrade it.
The project is double its original cost, right? And it's, 8 years late, whatever it is.
And how come businesses could do that? How come businesses can upgrade their equipment and they can do it in a timely fashion? They can do it in a couple of months. They can do it in 3, 4, 5, 6 months.
Right.
How come it takes the government to 6, 8, 10 years to upgrade? By the time they upgrade, the equipment that they're upgrading to is going to be null and void.
Some states are able to do it well. We typically don't here. Part of it is staffing. You need to have, so if you're going to build a house, if you yourself don't know about proper construction techniques, you better make sure you have a general contractor
who does. Right.
And our problem in state government is we don't have a whole bunch of people who are experts at running high-tech projects like that. And it kills us.
Well, that's why you hire somebody that does.
Well, you need to hire them. You need to pay them a competitive salary, right? And these are things that sometimes our government really doesn't do well at all.
Like the $165,000 they give the assistant to the lieutenant governor.
That would make for a highly competitive salary.
You could hold that salary open and use it for all these different things that you have. Yeah. Really. I mean, it sounds stupid, but it's not. I think it's a very smart way of doing things.
It's common sense, right? We can't run big projects if we don't have people who are capable of running big projects. And that's been one of our consistent problems for a long time.
Now, your election is September.
So we have a primary, on September 9th.
And your opponent.
So and I'm running against Cranston's mayor. In the Republican primary.
Now, I wasn't even going to give you that. That was your opponent. That's the way I firmly believe in that stuff. I don't believe in this negative advertising. I don't believe in ever saying the opponent's name. That's the way I grew up. Yep. And the more you say the opponent's name, the more you give validity to that opponent. I'm a firm believer, and I see these other candidates, they're banging the opponent's name.
Well, there was a very interesting commercial run against me.
I was going to get to.
That actually, I think, probably bought me 10 points of name
There's no doubt about it.
There's no doubt about it.
I said that to so many people. How many times was your name mentioned in that ad?
Not enough.
Well, more than it should have been. More than it would have been if I was his campaign manager. You wouldn't have heard your name. I said, this is not a very good way to spend money.
It worked for me just fine.
I'm sure it did.
I liked it.
I'm sure, and I said right away, the very first time I saw that ad, what do they call them? The
Blockheads.
Blockheads. I said, that is going to come out to be a very positive to your campaign. It has to. It has to be a positive to your campaign.
Yeah.
It's not a negative to your campaign. And I said that was a big, not only a waste of money, that actually you should have been charged in your campaign for the money spent on that ad.
I'd love for him to put it back on the air, to be honest with you. I mean, I'd love to see that back on the air. But
So what difference? What's the difference between you?
Well, so there's the big difference between myself and everybody else who's running for governor is that I have experience in finding cost savings in government. That's what I do professionally.
Right.
I have experience in dealing with really big bureaucracies. You know, we
Texas
we
is
are
pretty big.
We are a prime contractor to the state of Texas. At one time, the state agency that we report to had more people working for it than live in the town of Barrington, Rhode Island.
Wow.
Right? Big agencies, big bureaucracies, and we know how to work within that style of government. It's really important because when you get in, you need a plan, you need to know what you're going to do, and you have to be able to function inside a bureaucracy. So all of those elements I already have on board. The really colossal difference, the game-changing difference in this
Right.
whole thing, is that I am a small business owner. I've created jobs. I understand how to balance sheets. I understand the cost of insurance.
Workman's
And
comp,
I'm a detail guy. Okay, we've had governors who've been big business guys,
Right.
and they function and think really differently than a small business person. I know a lot of your listeners are small business people.
And viewers.
And
yes.
viewers, listeners and viewers. As a small business owner, you have to be into and aware of the details, right? I am a software engineer by training. That's what I do. So I can get onto those computers and do what we do professionally. I don't just run the business and market the business. I'm also able to do the software engineering behind it. I'll make the coffee if the coffee needs to be made, and frankly, if the toilet needs to be plunged, I'll plunge the toilet,
Yeah.
right? But that's the mindset and mentality of a small business
Of a hands-on,
owner, right?
or a small businessman
and
has to do that. I was a small
you have
businessman. Yes,
to do
exactly.
this. And that's the key, right? I'm not looking to simply be chauffeured around the state. I want to roll up my sleeves, and I want to get in to all of these state agencies that are not functioning well, and we're going to make them function well. We're going to make government efficient. We're going to find the savings to turn around. And it's not just state government. We also have a challenge with local government.
Right.
Okay? Now, Rhode Island is a state of 39 cities and
I
towns.
knew you were going to get into that. Yeah.
39
Which I was
cities
going to
and
get
towns.
into if you didn't.
We are the size of Metro Houston
Right.
in terms of landmass. We're
Sure.
1,000 square miles. And our population is smaller than the city of San Diego.
Yet.
Okay, just to put the whole thing together. Now, we have 39 cities and towns, 36 school districts. It's really hard to do anything about that.
Right.
Okay, those are not particularly addressable problems. But now, everything beyond that we can deal with. So, as an example, most of our cities and towns buy their emergency vehicles separately from each other. So instead of getting a nice deal, buying
Right.
it all in one,
Right.
so my job as governor is to negotiate an aggressively priced deal. And then I want all of our cities and towns to buy their emergency vehicles under that contract.
Sure.
Okay? Now we can begin to return real savings to cities and towns. We talked about Rhode Island being different than every other state. 48 other states do their emergency dispatch when you call 911 differently than Rhode Island does. Okay? When you call 911 in Rhode Island, the phone call is picked up in Scituate. Okay?
Yep.
It goes to Scituate, Rhode Island. And once that call is answered and they talk to you, they get all of your information, they then have to transfer the call. And it's where the transfer happens that we get very different from other states.
Right.
They then have to transfer it to a redundant emergency dispatch that is
Localized.
somewhere else, local.
Right.
Okay? And that's where we go off the rails. Because when they transfer that call, the person who picks up that call, if any of your listeners have ever had the misfortune of calling 911, you know that you have to give your information twice. You give it to the emergency dispatch
Right,
person who
right.
answers it the first time.
Right.
They have to give it again to the person who you're talking to, who eventually rolls the equipment to you. And here's the
Wow.
craziest thing of all.
So that's only here? They don't do that in other states,
in
right?
other states, it happens from the same place where they pick up the phone the first time.
Now, why is it necessary for Rhode Island, in such a small state, to have the redundancy? Why is it necessary to have the two-tiered?
Other states have changed their system over time, and Rhode Island is usually very reluctant to change. Right? It's a question of reluctance to change. We see that, right? And it's not just. I'll finish emergency dispatch. I'm going to tell you a story about reluctance to change. If you have the misfortune of needing 911, let's say police and fire, in a community like Cranston, they don't have one dispatch center. They actually have two. They have a separate dispatch for fire that's different than the one for police. Okay? Now, in Woonsocket,
Yep.
they had separate police and fire dispatch. And they have a fiscal crisis in Woonsocket, so they have to make changes to save money. They consolidated police and fire in Woonsocket. They saved $600,000
Wow.
when they did it.
Well, because
There you go.
Three less people each shift,
So,
or each day, right?
It makes common sense,
Right.
and it's something that we have to do. And so one of the things that I am proposing doing is making this sort of change. We have to begin to consolidate our local services to save the money that we need, because let's face it, we all hate the car tax. We hate the car tax. The reason we have a car tax, and most other states don't, is because of the cost of our local services. Lincoln, Rhode Island is, in my opinion, the poster child for the problem. Do you know how many fire departments they have
5.
in Lincoln? They have 6.
Oh, 6?
6 different fire
I thought it was
departments
5, 6.
in
All right.
Lincoln, Rhode Island.
Yep.
They have 6 fire chiefs. They have 6 fire chiefs' vehicles. Okay? Now, Lincoln, Rhode Island.
How many people live in Lincoln, Rhode Island?
20,000. 21,000. Now, I'm not a geography major or a whiz, but I'm
Right.
pretty confident to say that Lincoln, Rhode Island is not on the ocean. It's inland.
It's inland. Oh, it has Lincoln Woods.
It has Lincoln Woods. You know how many fireboats they have in Lincoln, Rhode Island?
Don't tell
They
me.
have 3 fireboats. The city by the sea, the city of Newport, Rhode Island, has 1 fireboat. Okay? So it's this kind of redundancy that is a gigantic challenge for us here in Rhode Island. It's what drives the property tax. It's what drives the car tax. And it's my job as governor to identify this waste, to quantify it, and to get people to care enough about it to make the changes necessary. How do we end up with 6 different fire departments in the 21,000 person community of Lincoln, Rhode Island?
I don't know.
Okay. Back in the 1800s, when we had valuable mills sprinkled around all over the state, we would put the fire departments right next to the mills because we had fire trucks that were pulled by horses, and it made perfect common sense to do that.
Right.
The mills aren't there anymore.
And they're
but
not
the
using
firehouse-
horses and
But the
buggies anyway.
firehouses are still there.
Right.
Okay?
Well, you know,
So-
it makes no sense to me. In the city of Providence, do you know they have at least 100 more firemen than they do policemen?
I just heard that the other day.
In fact, it's probably right now it's even more because I know they're down to 400 policemen in Providence, and I know they have over 500 firemen. Over 500 firemen, only 400 policemen in Providence.
So think about what we just talked about, okay? We talked about firehouses that are relics of the 1800s.
Right.
We've talked about a state that still does their timesheets on paper instead of on computer. That's something that dates back to the 1940s, even earlier, right? We have a DMV with 1980s technology, right? We are a state with an 1800s mindset using 1980s technology, trying to be a 21st century state. And guess what? It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't
And
work.
it's never going to work. And I try to tell my viewers that you can't continue to elect the same people, the same kind of people. They may change their position in government, but they go from one position, go from mayor, they go to this department, then they go to that department, then they run to that for that department. And they're the same people. You can't continue to do that and expect a different result. It's not going to happen.
So the phase in the campaign that we're in now, we have all these forums. So where all the candidates for governor sit in a line and they're asked the same question and they have to answer it. And you end up having forums sponsored by a whole bunch of different special interests. So yesterday,
Right.
there was the Senior Coalition Agenda. The Senior Agenda Coalition was yesterday. We've been in front of Latino interests. We've been in front of, I mean, every possible interest usually has a forum at some point.
Right.
And one of the other very large differences between myself and the other candidates is I'm always going to responsibly talk about spending. So if I'm going to spend money, I'm going to tell you how I'm going to find the money to pay for it,
Sure.
especially where you have a $150 million budget deficit staring us in the face right now. At all these forums, the other candidates are all spending money like drunken sailors.
Right.
Right?
But where they
Well,
getting it?
Yeah, we're gonna fix all the bridges. Don't worry, we're just gonna fix them. Well, that costs money that
Right.
we don't have.
Right.
Okay. At the senior event, Meals on Wheels has been cut. All these other good programs, important programs, have been cut. And the stock answer is we're going to put it back, but they can't tell you how. And that's the difference, because if a politician says they're going to spend money, but they can't tell you how they're going to pay for it, especially when we're short $150 million, they don't know how to fix it. And it's just hot air, right? That's the difference. That's the
Right.
key. And frankly, that's the kind of politics that they're practicing that have gotten us into the trouble that
Exactly. So they got to stop. They got to stop listening to the bull and think of reality. Think of logic. Think
Yeah.
logically.
Think responsibly.
Right.
Right? I mean, we are in an economic crisis.
We are definitely in.
And there was just an article on the front page of the paper this weekend that something like 1,100 millennials, these are kids in their 20s,
Right.
who've left. On balance, 1,100 have left.
Right.
In a small state like Rhode Island, that's a big
Sure.
number, right? Because those 1,100 20-somethings, were they to stay here and find the jobs and progress through their careers, become the solid middle class that we
Yes.
need, and then those who are really successful, they become
The
They
leaders.
become the leaders. And when they're not here, and we're missing
It's a void.
a big part of a generation,
Right.
what do you do, right? We can't afford to have a state where we're missing a chunk of a generation. We have to solve that problem, and the reason that they're leaving is lack of opportunity.
Right.
I'm running to bring opportunity back to the state. I want to make the conditions right in Rhode Island so that jobs can be brought back to the state. That's how you do it. I believe the job of government is to get out of the way. I believe that the job of government is to spend your tax dollars as carefully as you spend your own. When you accomplish those things, now you can make the difference that we need to make Rhode Island achieve its potential. We have all the potential in the world.
And we
don't
have all
realize
the beauty in the world. We have one of the most beautiful states in the United States. I've been to 46 of them.
Yes.
We have one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful state in the country. We have all kinds of benefits and everything to attract people, yet we don't do it.
Yeah.
Or we do it in a small way. We don't do it in a big enough way.
Right.
And it's sad, but it continues to happen and happen as it does. Now, that is the whole block plan. That you want to.
So the essence of the block plan is that we are going to find, identify, and save $1 billion over the course of 4 years. $2 of every $3 that we find goes back into the pockets of taxpayers, whether it's corporate taxpayers or individuals. And one of those dollars, we call it 3-2-1.
Right.
And one of those dollars is used to help close the budget deficit that we have. Okay, it's totally achievable over 4 years. The numbers really aren't that large when you get right down to it. And imagine when we make the changes that we have to make to temporary disability insurance, we're going to put $200 to $400 a year every year back into the paychecks of working Rhode Islanders. That's a lot of money. That's
Sure.
$80 million a year. That's more money than we blew on 38 studios.
I was going to bring that up, 38 Studios. 4 years ago, that was during the campaign.
It
During the
was.
campaign, I was against that, paying that money, or giving that money to one person. I said, instead of giving $75 million to one person, you give $1 million to 75 entrepreneurs. Or you give $100,000 to 1,000 entrepreneurs.
Right.
You don't, it's called not putting all your eggs in one basket. Now that it's come, it's happened, it's there, would you pay for it?
No, I don't believe we should pay for it.
I don't believe. Didn't we also have an insurance policy?
There was all kinds
A
of
$2 million
things.
insurance policy to protect ourselves, and some friend of a friend made the big commission on that insurance policy?
Look, so now you're touching on the other big element of Rhode Island politics that has to change. One of the bigger problems that we have in this state is the political insiders.
Oh, absolutely.
And the damage that they cause to us.
Look at that one lawyer made 3 different deals with
the cost of
38
corruption.
studios.
The cost of corruption is awful. Let's just talk about this year. This year, we've seen a Speaker of the House, Speaker Fox, had his home and his office at the State House raided by the FBI, the IRS, and the state police.
Right.
Okay. Now, I've heard rumors that the CIA had drones circling the State House and that the Navy brought a destroyer up the bay. Okay, just rumors. I can't prove any of that. That's what I hear. Okay. We have the state police running the Cranston Police Department
Right.
because of the scandals that are happening in that department. And we just learned last week that the chairman of the Democratic Party in Rhode Island had to step down amid allegations of collusion about a state contract that he won. Okay?
Wow.
This sort of thing kills us. And it's wrong.
It makes us look
But it doesn't just make us look. The reality is that corruption costs.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
38 Studios was corrupt. It cost us effectively close to $100 million.
$100 million.
Right? We had a state rep tied up with the Democratic Party chairman with a beach concession contract.
Yes.
What is a state rep doing competing for a state contract? Right? That in and of itself is corrupt because he can control the budget of the state agency that gave him that contract. It's wrong, right? People getting into government for the wrong reasons. And I'm all about fixing that, changing that dynamic. We've had it with the political insiders. They're not doing anything to fix what's broken in this.
And you would think that every taxpayer and voter in the state of Rhode Island, every viewer of this show would say, wait a minute, I've had enough of this. It's costing us so much money. The 38 Studios should have been the straw that broke the camel's back.
No question.
And every person, every voter in the state of Rhode Island should say, I'm not voting for anybody that's in office. I'm voting for all new people. I want all new people in the
Throw
state
the bums
house.
out.
Throw them all out. That's what I would do. I would throw them all out.
And
You got to make changes, and the only way you make changes is you got to make wholesale changes.
So here's what I ask everybody.
Go ahead, give it to us.
In this confusing election season, you're going to be bombarded by TV commercials. You're going to be bombarded by telephone calls. Your mail is going to be chock full of stuff. You got to fight your way through all of that, and you got to figure something out, something basic. Who's got the workable, viable ideas to fix what's broken in this state? That's your mission. You got to figure that out. And every politician will look you in the eye like I'm doing right now and say, I've got those ideas. But I know that you're smart enough to figure it all out. You have to ask yourself, how is this person going to pay for the proposals that they have? How will this person govern? Is this person motivated to fix things and do the right thing, or is this person motivated by something else? Those are the questions. This election is crucially important. We can fix what's broken in this state. Together, we can fix this state.
There you go. Well, thank you.
Thank
Ken.
you.
Well, you got to hang here for a minute because I want to run through this quickly. Newport Comedy Series. My friend Joe Rocco runs it down there, and on the 15th of August, he has comedians during the whole month of August. He's got this Mike Birbiglia. And then on the 17th, he's got Bill Cosby's coming to town for 2 shows, 4 o'clock and 7:30. There's still tickets available for the 4 o'clock. And then on the 22nd, he has Jim Jeffers. This guy's an Australian comedian. He's hilariously funny. And on the 30th, he has Amy Schumacher. I think that's how you pronounce it. I hope I didn't mess it up. And we should talk about, for a minute, we're going to talk about what I'm doing here. I started to say it at the beginning. I got stuck here since the 13th of May. I had a ridiculously bad infection in my knee. They had to take my knee out, and for 66 days I had no knee. And they just put my knee back in on the 16th of July, and I just been told that I'm finally going to get out of here by August 9th, I think, to get out of here. So that will be 70 days here and 10 days in the hospital. dealing with this knee infection, and then I find out, as I told you off camera, that my attorney, I got rear-ended, stopped dead, got to turn down my street. I get rear-ended by a woman while she's texting. She gets charged with texting. I have this attorney working on the case. I find out in February of this year, 4 years later, 3 knee operations later, my lawyer, I keep sending him the bills, all these co-pays that I'm getting. I send him all the co-pays, and I find out just recently that he's moved out of the country. He never filed the claim. So I call Allstate, and they tell me they're off. They don't have to pay anything. They're off the hook. And I said, don't wait a minute. I've been your customer for almost 15 years. I was hit by an Allstate driver who has Allstate insurance. I'm an Allstate, insured by Allstate. You mean to tell me you're not even going to pay my medical bills? I said, I guess I'm not in good hands with Allstate then.
Wow. I have a question for you.
Good.
The doc who gave you a new knee, the doc who put a knee in
Right.
you, do you think he can put a spine in some of these politicians?
I don't think he could.
No? Okay.
I don't think you could. You got a spine or you don't have a spine.
It
And
is-
most of
I
these
had to
people
ask. I had to ask.
don't have a spine, and that's why they always went from a kid. From the time I first ran for state representative, just out of college. I lost by 2 votes in a 3-man race.
Wow.
I ran 4 years later after they gerrymandered me out of my district. I lost by 37 votes in a 2-man race.
Wow.
I was going to run this time for lieutenant governor. The papers got messed up. The guy going down to fill out the papers, he didn't come back to me because I had to sign a paper. So it ended up, he filed me for the district, 59 district. My rep had left last minute, last day. He filed me for that district. I left here one day just to go get some signatures. I got 68 signatures, right? I turn them in, I come back here dead, my knees killing me, my legs killing me. I find out the next day I had 49, I needed 50, I had 49 good signatures. So I'm gonna call myself single digit Bob because I've gotten beat by 2 votes, I've gotten beat by 37 votes, or under 100 Bob, I guess I'll call myself. And then by one vote, because I should have won that, I think I could have won that district easily. Because the guy they put up was my former councilman, or is my councilman. He wasn't a very good councilman, so he certainly, I doubt that it'll be a good state rep. So I could have beaten him, I think, very
Well, listen,
easily.
don't lose heart. Keep up the good fight. We need good people running and winning office.
Well, I'm beyond that, but we need people like you. We need people like Ken Block, who puts himself out there, doesn't have the kind of money that some of these other candidates, but he also doesn't have the baggage that some of these other candidates have. He doesn't have the big unions backing him up. He doesn't have the people that he's got to owe big favors to when it's all over. And that's why we are in the problems we are in. We have the problems we have, is because it's all paid back after.
Yeah. Listen, I like to be able to say that I don't owe anybody anything but my wife.
There you go. That's all you need.
That's
too.
all you need.
All right. Thank you again,
Thank
Ken
you.
Block. Thanks for stopping by.
Appreciate
Best
it.
of luck
Thank
on
you,
the
sir.
9th, is it?
September 9th, Republican primary. Please vote.
All right. And thank you, folks. Don't forget, vote September 9th. I don't want to hear your stories. If you don't vote, don't ever complain, because you don't deserve to complain if you don't vote. This is something that people, Americans, have given their lives for over decades. And if you don't vote, you have no place to complain. And I don't want to hear it, that's for sure. Well, thank you, folks, for spending an hour with Bob, and hopefully I'll see you out when I'm out on the streets, because I'm getting out.